It's a shocking
It
fall from
started with
grace
a
in
knock,
less than a
then
year.
a
P. Diddy
battering
went from
ram.
beloved
On a
music
quiet morning
icon
in
to
March
disgraced sexual
2024,
predator. At
Homeland
least
Security
according to the
agents
charges from
stormed
the
Sean
feds
Diddy
right
Combs'
now.
LA
He's behind
mansion in the
bars in New
elite
York,
neighborhood
the
of
same
Palm Beach
place where just
Hills.
last year he
Not
was
long
given a
after,
key to
another
the
team hit
city.
his
It was a
Miami property
disturbing
on the
set of
glitzy Star
allegations that
Island.
led to Diddy's
These weren't
arrest in
just
the way of
casual
multiple
searches,
civil suits
these were
brought by
federal raids with
accusers. And in
helicopters
some of those
overhead,
suits,
agents in
co-defendants
full
are
tactical
listed, and
gear,
in
and
others,
entire
celebrities.
blocks
Could
on
it be a time
lockdown.
of
What were they
reckoning for
looking
them
for?
too? We're
That
taking a
question didn't
deep
stay
dive into all
unanswered
the
for long.
celebrities listed in
Inside the
Diddy's
sprawling
civil lawsuit and whether
17,000
they
square
too
foot
could
mansion,
face federal
agents
charges.
uncovered a
I'm
scene that
Sierra
left even
Gillespie, and
seasoned
this is
investigators
Law&Crime
allegedly
News. A
plan
groundbreaking
and
case
control the
brought
sex
forth just this
performances,
week when
which he
54-year-old
called
Shaw Diddy
freak-offs.
Combs was arrested on
And he
September
often
15th.
electronically recorded
He
them.
now faces some
A
pretty
few
serious
bottles.
federal
We're talking
charges:
hundreds. It
racketeering,
looked less like
conspiracy, trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, and transportation to engage in prostitution. Did was indicted by a federal grand jury and is now being held in Brooklyn at the Metropolitan Detention Center after he was twice denied bail. Diddy's attorneys say he was in New York for about a week before the arrest, anticipating the federal indictment. But he wasn't the only one who kind of saw this coming after federal investigators raided two of Diddy's homes back in March. We kind of had an idea something was on the way. Just this week, we learned some of the items that investigators collected during those raids of Diddy's homes in both Miami and Los Angeles. According to the indictment against Diddy, investigators seized more than 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lubricants from his homes. The court states that these items were used in something referred to as freak-offs, which were elaborate and produced sex performances that Combs arranged, directed, masturbated during, and often electronically recorded. According to prosecutors, Diddy and his associates transported commercial sex workers over state lines and even international. Diddy then allegedly gave these sex workers and victim-controlled substances, at times unannounced to the victims. Prosecutors say Diddy did this to keep the victims obedient and compliant. He then took videos of victims having sex with these sex workers, sometimes without their consent. After all this, both Diddy and the victims would receive IV fluids, recover from the physical exertion and drug use. Federal investigators say that during the raids of Diddy's homes, they collected some of these recordings showing the disturbing details of these freak-offs, and the feds had a heads up about these recordings thanks to some of the civil lawsuits filed against Diddy, namely the one brought by Rodney Jones, also known as the producer Lil Rod. Lil Rod worked with Diddy on his Love album starting in 2022 and says he experienced months of abuse all at the hands of Diddy in his lengthy civil suit. Lil Rod refers to these recordings saying, quote, "Mr. Cole required Mr. Jones, that's Lil Rod, to record him constantly. Mr. Jones has secured hundreds of hours of footage and audio recordings of Mr. Combs, his staff, and his guests engaging in some serious legal activity." Lil Rod's lawsuit also lays out some other pretty disturbing claims, like that Diddy sexually assaulted him and forced Lil Rod to have sex with a prostitute. But Lil Rod's lawsuit came out swinging in more ways than one. Not only did it shed light on the dark allegations against Diddy, but it dropped some high-profile celebrity names too. First, there's Academy Award-winning actor Cuba Gooding Jr. Lil Rod alleges Diddy was, quote, grooming him to pass him off to his friends. This fear became reality when Mr. Combs introduced Mr. Jones to Cuba Gooding Jr. while they were on Mr. Combs' yacht. The lawsuit includes pictures of this too, showing both Diddy with Cuba and then Cuba with his arms around Lil Rod. Court dues go on to say, quote, Cuba Gooding Jr. began touching, groping, and fondling Mr. Jones's legs, his upper inner thighs near his groin, and the small of his back near his buttocks and his shoulders. He rejected his advances, and Mr. Gooding Jr. did not stop until Mr. Jones forcibly pushed him away. Here's former prosecutor Melba Pearson. In the last couple of years, there were allegations against him for sexual assault, so now we had those prior allegations, and now we see him tied to this case as allegedly trying to, assault assault others back in 21 misdemeanor charges of forcible touching and sexual abuse. After allegedly groping a woman in Times Square by the next year, 3 women had come forward accusing him of non-consensual sexual touching. He eventually reached a plea deal with prosecutors that required 6 months of counseling, but no jail time. Just this summer, he appeared on Dan Abrams Live, where he discussed those charges when you pleaded guilty to a forcible touching misdemeanor in 2022, eventually led to a guilty plea of a lesser charge. A year later, you settled a federal civil lawsuit, 2 more civil misconduct lawsuits. Can you understand why some would say, don't want to cast this guy? Sure, but I can also understand some people who come up to me in the street all the time and yell, show me the money, and say, hang in there, and I see what you're going through. You make movies for an audience of people, right? Right now, I'm making a movie for faith-based people who are excited to know our hope in humanity. especially the times we're in dealing with politics and the world issues that are going on. So that's where I am now. And have you expressed regret, sorrow, apologies for what happened previously? Everything that happens in my life is for a reason. I believe that. And if I continue to walk on my path, whatever that is, I know at the end result it'll be to make me stronger, to be a better person, to be a better father, and right now that's the moment I'm in. Back to Melba says it's possible that charges could be brought against the actor. I am getting the feeling where there's smoke, there's fire, right? Because now we have two different instances where you're accused of the same type of behavior, years apart. I think there's something there, and I don't like Cooper G. Jr. is going to escape from that one because he already saw definitely people moving away from him within Hollywood circles and other circles once those first sexual assault allegations came out. So at this point, I don't think he's going to get away with it a second time. Is possible that he could face charges based on these allegations that were brought forward by Lil Rod. It is possible as well. Again, we've got the statute of limitations issue to deal with. So depending on the time frame of when this happened is, again, the Adult Survivors Act, which was the vehicle where many of these lawsuits came out. When if these civil law school suits, came out there was a thin out amount of time for those suits to be filed. The time frame is going to be very, very important. What witnesses come forward, because again, this may not be a situation where DNA may be at play. This may be more of a situation of, hey, yes, I was there and I recall, Cuba Jr., putting his hands on BL Rod, or I, recall certain aspects. So it's going to be a very witness intensive type of case. And the question is, will witnesses be willing to come forward? Another high profile name listed in Lil Rod's lawsuit is Jennifer Lopez. From the standpoint of the names of the celebrities that were tied to this, the fact that Jennifer Lopez was tied to this back when she was involved in or party to a shooting at a nightclub when she was dating Diddy, and is now alleged to have brought the gun with her to the scene and gave it to Diddy. And that's how the shooting occurred.
Present,
Lil Rod's
and
team
no
brings
longer
up
has a
J-Lo
voice
when
who will pursue
establishing
justice
Diddy's
for her
history, writing,
accusation.
quote, Rico Enterprise has
As of the
existed
taken
for
against
at
Diddy,
least dating back
no
to the
expansion of the
1999
investigation,
nightclub shooting
no
in
isolation
NYC
orders,
when Mr.
no
Comas
equipment access,
required his
no
then-girlfriend
suspension of
Jennifer
attorney
Lopez to
communication.
transport his illegal
Everything inside
firearm
solitary
into the
Block C
NYC
continued as
nightclub. You
before.
also alleged
Everything
Diddy forced
except
his
the
then
fear.
artist Shine
If a
to
female
assume
warden can
responsibility
vanish
for the
after a
shooting of
single
several
note, except
individuals.
the
Shooting
fear.
happened on
If a
December
female
27,
warden can vanish after a single
1999
note,
at about
ones who
2:55
once
a.m.
worked
A
overnight
fight
in
broke
that
out at a
area,
nightclub in
the
New
ones
York
who
City
filed for
between
leave
Diddy
without
Jamal
giving a
Barrows, is
reason,
known as
the
the
ones who
rapper
saw
Shine,
but never
and
spoke.
Matthew Allen,
No one
who went
mentions
by
the
the
note,
nickname Scar
but
Guns,
everyone knows
were
it
drawn,
appeared.
and 3
And if what
people
it
were
says
shot.
is
No one
true,
suffered
then
any
punishment.
life-threatening injuries,
Part
and the
3.
victims
The
were not
person no
involved in
longer in the
fight.
system. The
J-Lo and
internal
Diddy
personnel
fled from the
database
scene
of
in
the
a car,
Atlanta
but were
Federal
later
Detention
arrested
Center
and charged.
updated its
J-Lo's
weekly
charges were
roster.
dropped,
Under
but
the
the others
category
stuck. Diddy
Special
was
Personnel
acquitted,
Code
but
Adjustment,
Shine was
the
sentenced to
name
10
of
years in
Warden
prison.
TD was
He
marked
was
as
released in
removed from system
2009
by
and
administrative
deported
order.
back to home
There was no
country of
decision
Belize.
number
Lil
recorded,
Rod
but was
alleges it was
deactivated.
Diddy who pulled
Her
the
personal
trigger, and
contact
Shine
information
just took the
disappeared
fall
from
for
the
him
internal
because of this
network
allegation.
exactly
Experts like
36
former
hours
FBI
after
agent
she
Bobby
filed her
Jones
complaint.
say
The
investigators
changelog
could
was
take a second look
executed
at
from the
the shooting if
system's
there's a
highest
civil
access
lawsuit that
level
lays out
server,
this
a device
allegation.
bearing the
What would it take
identifier
to reopen an
DCCA1,
investigation into something
located
that
in the
happened
coordination
25 years
office on the
ago?
4th floor
Well,
of the Security Administration Wing.
it would take a different
Only
look
2
at it.
individuals possess the authority to
In other
perform
words,
a
he was
system-level
acquitted on the state
personnel
murder
removal at
charges.
that
Now,
tier,
federal
the head of
charges can
Federal
be
Human
different.
Resources
You can have
and
RICO, you
Detention
can have a
Center.
continuing criminal
No
enterprise,
confirmation
you can have
exists
the
as patient was
underlying
made.
acts,
The removal of
predicate
Warden
acts, if we need
TD's
to call
name
them
was
one
not
of the
accompanied by any
RICO
or
cases.
protective
A RICO
reassignment.
predicate act
At
could be something
11:20
like that
a.m., a printed
1999
copy of the
case,
personnel
and you can
deployment
use it
chart
as
was
a predicate
generated
act.
in preparation for the
You
new
can
week's
bring it up.
schedule.
You can,
Under the
when I
section
worked
marked
cold
Internal
cases,
Alert,
of this
TD's
type,
name
sometimes with the passage of time, people aren't as intimidated and they're not as threatened, and they get away from the person who is the threat, and they feel more forthcoming to testify or to give statements in testimony. But certainly, I think that that case is going to be part of it. In the aftermath of that, they have witnesses that say he bragged about intimidating witnesses, paying off jurors. Certain when you have that kind of stuff, if you go back and you find that juror that was paid off, or jurors multiple that may have been paid off, certainly that gives you the impetus to kind of come forward and refresh those charges on a federal case. So the federal cases will be a little different. The charges are a little different, so it's not double jeopardy. Um, and so I think that that case that you mentioned that you cite, I think is certainly one of the ones they're looking to build into a much bigger, to me, maybe a RICO type case. We also know that federal investigators have spoken to other plaintiffs in civil cases against Diddy to learn more about his personality and what he's like in relationships. That means J-Lo is someone the feds will want to talk to if they haven't already. It also means she could be called to testify against him. It's possible. It's absolutely possible. If I was the prosecutor handling that case, I absolutely would list her, right? But of course, we need to know whether or not she'd be cooperative. That, of course, changes the strategy when it comes to trial. So you may list someone as a potential witness. That does not mean you're necessarily going to call them. The question is whether or not they're going to testimony is really going to help you. But there is a universe where she could testify against him in terms of, violence, in terms of his interactions with other artists, uh, especially the folks that have been coming forward alleging that he has harmed them in some way or engaged in human
will leave you
trafficking and sex
speechless.
trafficking.
When the first
So
images from
was
the
she
federal
aware of
raid on
any of
Diddy's
that
$40
going
million
on?
Los
Did she
Angeles
see
estate were
him
released,
with
no one
underage
expected
girls,
this.
or was
Neatly
she
stacked in
present
display
for
cabinets
when
like
some of
prized
those
possessions
videos
were
taken?
200
That little
bottles of
rotting,
baby oil. Right next to
included
them,
screenshots
over
of those
900
videos
bottles
his
of lubricant.
pleadings.
Rows
So
and
how much of
rows.
that
It
did
looked
she know?
less
When
like a
did she
home
know
and
it?
more like a
And what
warehouse for
actions
something
did she
far more
take at the
disturbing.
time?
These
Is
weren't the
that
kind
part
of
of the
items
reason
most
why they
people keep
broke
in
up?
bulk,
We
but
don't
for
know.
investigators,
So
it
all of
painted a
this still
chilling
to be
picture.
seen.
Why would
Obviously,
one
the
of the most powerful
prosecution
men
and
in
law
hip-hop need
enforcement
this
need to
much?
speak with her,
And
get a
more
statement
importantly,
from her
what
to
exactly were
understand
they used
what
for?
she knows or what she'd be able to
It started
testify
with a
to, and
knock,
then make
then a
appropriate
battering ram.
decisions from
On a
there.
quiet
But
morning
it's
in
not
March
just artists that will
2024,
rot and
Homeland
either.
Security
You
agents stormed
specifically
Sean Diddy
mentioned
Combs'
Prince
LA
Harry, the Duke
mansion
of
in the elite
Sussex, and
neighborhood of
talks.
Holmby
It
Hills.
reads in part,
Not long
quote,
after, another
Mr.
team hit his
Combs was
Miami
known for
property on the
throwing the
glitzy
best
Star
parties.
Island.
Affiliation
These
with
weren't
Endor
just casual
sponsorship.
searches,
Mr.
these were
Combs'
federal
sex
raids with
trafficking
helicopters
parties garner
overhead,
legitimacy
agents
and
in full
access to
tactical gear,
celebrities,
and entire
such as
blocks on
famous athletes,
lockdown. What were they
political
looking for?
figures,
That
artists,
question didn't stay
musicians,
unanswered
and
for long.
international
Inside the
dignitaries like
sprawling
British royal Prince
17,000
Harry.
square foot
Why
mansion,
even
agents
name Prince
uncovered a
Harry?
scene
There's
that
no
left even
allegations
seasoned
against him or
investigators
anything,
allegedly
but why
planned
bring him up?
and
Think it
controlled
may
the
have
sex
been a move to bring
performances,
more credibility
which
to
he
the
called
filing and
freak-offs,
say that,
and he opted
basically he
electronically
was
recorded
using,
them.
he being
A few
Diddy was
bottles.
using
We're
his
talking
fame, fortune,
hundreds.
and
It
influence
looked
to
less like
insulate himself, so he was able to legitimize some of the activities he was doing by having these lavish parties, bring all these A-list celebrities, but somewhere in a back room or somewhere in another wing, horrible things were happening. So the fact that Prince Harry was there does not necessarily mean he was participating in what was happening. And just because you were at a party doesn't mean what's happening in every inch of the house. I mean, if you think about it, if the part is being thrown in a mansion, there are various floors and wings. So it is completely possible that he was there and did not participate. Now, you had said Prince Andrew, especially as a result of the allegations that came out in connection with the Epstein case, that they were close and that they traveled together. And, there was a person that alleged that he had sexually assaulted her while she was underage. That would be a different story. But Prince Harry, and the way that it was mentioned, seems to be very, again, just sort of trying to bring legitimacy and talk about these were the people that he surrounded himself by to protect himself. Prince Harry has no criminal charges or even any accusations of illegal activity, but he could still see the inside of a courtroom in a defamation case. It's possible that Prince Harry may be able to preserve his reputation, and since it was such a minuscule mention in the greater context of this filing, he may be okay. Another celebrity mentioned in Lil Rod's lawsuit is Young Miami, who dated Diddy from the lawsuit. Young Miami's cousin assaulted Lil Rod during the Thanksgiving holiday in 20. It reads, quote, Young Miami's cousin burst into the bathroom and began groping Mr. Jones. She started undressing and attempted to straddle him and have sex with him in the presence of Mr. Combs and his staff. Similar to Prince Harry, there are no allegations against Young Miami herself, so there's probably no worry of charges being filed against her, but there could be charges against some of the other people listed in Lil Rod's lawsuit. That's people like Diddy's chief of staff, Christina Coram, who Lil Rod compares to Ghislaine Maxwell, the longtime companion of Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein died by suicide in 2019 when he faced numerous charges of sexual assault over the course of multiple years. Maxwell was charged and found guilty of sex trafficking in relation to her time with Epstein, and she is currently serving a lengthy prison sentence.
Lil Rod says Christina Coram ordered sex workers and prostitutes for Mr. Combs and ordered and distributed ecstasy, cocaine, GHB, ketamine, marijuana, and mushrooms to Mr. Combs and his celebrity guests who were present on his rented yacht and his homes in NYC and Miami. This is referenced in Diddy's indictment too, saying members and associates of the Combs enterprise, including high-ranking supervisors, security staff, household staff, personal assistants, and other Combs business employees, facilitated the freak-offs by, among other things, booking hotel room for the freak-offs, stocking the hotel rooms in advance with the required freak-off supplies, including controlled substances, baby oil, lubricant, extra linens, and lighting. Federal prosecutors also alleged these associates arranged travel for victims and commercial sex workers, delivered large sums of cash to Diddy to pay these sex workers, and even scheduled the delivery of IV fluid. So according to Melba, it's possible some of these associates are charged too. None of these cases, when you have these high-profile people that have been using people over years, these cases happen without a hand. Kelly had a handler, Epstein had a handler, Weinstein had a handler. Everybody has. In those scenarios of those powerful people, powerful men that are abusing other people, they have someone that does their dirty work, and it's usually not only just one person, it's several people who may have different duties. So again, seeing this woman being his handler, being the person to get him drugs, being the person to procure sex workers for him, being the person to basically be on cleanup duty in case of, covering up or silencing people that might want to forward, that's not unusual. And she is also going to bear the brunt of criminal liability, just like Ghislaine Maxwell did, and basically had to take the entire brunt of the criminal justice system alone because of the fact that, Epstein committed suicide and was not able to be held accountable. And we can't talk about Diddy without mentioning Cassie, the one whose lawsuit blew the lid off Diddy's alleged scheme. She filed civil suit against Diddy last November under the New York Survivor Act, meaning any sexual assault survivor could file suit against their accused predator, and the statute of limitation didn't matter. Cassie's lawsuit was settled just one day after it was filed, but it was still made public, dropping a laundry list of bombshells about Diddy that the public hadn't previously heard. Cassie's lawsuit outlined years of abuse by Diddy, starting when she was just 19 years old, and at the time he was 37. According to her suit, Diddy was prone to uncontrollable rage and frequently beat Cassie savagely. Cassie alleged Diddy forced her to use drugs and would physically beat her or force her to have sex with prostitutes. Then there's the allegation that on at least 2 occasions Diddy demanded Cassie hold his gun in her purse. The lawsuit goes on to state, quote, "There was no clear reason why Mr. Combs required her to hold his guns, except to reinforce to his young girlfriend that he was violent, powerful, and dangerous." This echoes a similar allegation made by Lil Rod about Jennifer Lopez's part in the 1999 New York nightclub shooting. Not only did Jennifer Lopez allegedly bring the gun to the club, now we're also looking at years later Cassie coming forward and saying that Diddy forced her to carry a gun with her when they went out to different events. So again, I think that this is more along the lines of when you look at this from a domestic violence lens, from the standpoint of the abuser being very controlling and demanding certain activities to prove loyalty to, basically put yourself in a bad situation. Only he can be the one to save you, basically. So in seeing that, the parallels between J-Lo's experience and Cassie's experience, number one, it brings more credibility to what Cassie said in her pleadings, but also again, it causes us to look at Jennifer Lopez and be like some of the comments she made about the end of her relationship to Diddy in terms of, well, there was infidelity and, she kind of skirted the issue a bit. But when you
Present,
start to look back
and no
at your
longer
comments
has a
or comments,
voice who
you
will
start to
pursue
think,
justice for her
were you in a
accusation.
domestic violence
As of the
relationship?
taken against
Much
Diddy,
like how Kat
no
ended up in a
expansion of the
domestic violence
investigation,
relationship
no
with him.
isolation orders,
Cassie kind of
no
broke the
equipment
floodgates,
access,
so to speak,
no
when she
suspension
made
of
her
attorney
civil suit back in
communication.
November.
Everything
These crazy
inside solitary
allegations
block
we
C
never heard
continued
anything
as
like it
before.
before. And then
Everything
all of a
except
sudden
the
we
fear.
have several more
If a
people
female
coming
warden
forward,
can
and
vanish
now
after a
it's
single
turned
note,
to
thing except the
2024,
fear.
so we have
If a
multiple
female
plaintiffs
warden
who are
can
coming
vanish
forward,
after a single
alleging
note,
very
ones who
similar
once
things.
worked
I'm
overnight in
wondering
that
without
area.
these civil
The
suits
ones
would
who
we
filed
even
for
be
leave
here right
without
now?
giving a
Would
reason.
Diddy even
The
have
ones who
been
saw
arrested
but
and
never
indicted?
spoke.
I really
No one
don't think
mentions
so.
the
I really
note,
don't think
but
so,
everyone
because
knows it
Cassie's opened
appeared.
the floodgates,
And if
and
what
I
it
think
says
it
is
empowered
true,
other
the
survivors to
punishment.
come forward
Part
and
3.
tell their
The
story. And
person
then,
no longer
and
in
when
the
little
system.
Rod
The
came
internal
forward, I
personnel
think that was
database of the
just
Atlanta
another
Federal
huge,
Detention Center
just a huge
updated its
moment
weekly
in this case,
roster.
because
Under
now
the
we have
category
male
Special Personnel
victims
Code
coming
Adjustment,
forward, and we know
the name of
statistically
Warden
male victims
TD
of
was
sexual
marked as
assault
removed
generally
from
don't
system
report
by
for a number of
administrative
reasons,
order.
but
There
they
was no
many
decision number
times view it as
recorded,
an
but
attack
was
on their
deactivated.
masculinity, and they're
Her
very
personal
concerned about
contact
how they
information
treat you
disappeared from
publicly,
the
and little
internal
Rod was
network
raised,
exactly
which I really
36
commend
hours
his
after
bravery
she
in
filed her
standing up and
complaint.
saying, listen,
The changelog was
what happened to
executed
me,
from the
and
system's
that
highest
empowered
access
more
level
and more
server,
folks to
a
come
device
forward,
bearing the
including
identifier
most recently the
DCCA1,
NDK,
located
one of
in
the
the
members of
coordination
the
office on the
NDK,
4th
stating
floor of
that
the
he
Security
had
Administration Wing.
abused her, and she had
Only
witnessed
2
the abuse.
individuals
He
possess
had
the authority
loved
to
on
perform
others.
a
So I
system-level
think that
personnel
all these
removal at that
voices coming
tier, the
forward
head
saying,
of
listen,
Federal
there's
Human
something here,
Resources
the
and
feds took
Detention
notice,
Center.
and even though they may not
No
have been public
confirmation
about it at
exists
first,
as
we
patient
knew
was made.
obviously when they
The
searched
removal of
houses,
Warden
we knew that
TD's
this was
name was
getting
not
very
accompanied by
serious, that
any
they were
or
monitoring
protective
this, even if that
reassignment.
Cassie filed
At
her lawsuit, and
11:20
we read
a.m.,
those
a printed
allegations.
copy
I
of
can
the
assure you
personnel
that
deployment chart was
investigation
generated
started
in
immediately, and
preparation
then
for
as
the new
more and more
week's schedule.
survivors came forward
Under the
again,
section
the
marked
feds kept
Internal
going and
Alert,
interviewing
TD's
each of
name
those people, seeing what evidence they have. So for instance, do they have maybe some cell phone footage? Can they substantiate what occurred to them in other ways? Maybe follow-up text messages, emails. All of these things are aspects that are able to use to now bring in their case in chief against P. Months ago, we reported that Cassie was working with federal investigators in the case against Diddy. Can't know for sure whether she testified in the grand jury hearing that would ultimately indict Diddy, but it's likely at least some of his accusers did. I do believe that a number of the survivors would have testified. I don't think that they would have brought all of them because of the fact, number one, you want to testifying is traumatizing, especially when you're talking about the most awful day likely of your life and some very degrading things that happen to you, and you have to tell that to a bunch of people you don't know. So it's you have to be very cautious in when and how bring your victims and your survivors to testify, and think about that in terms of your strategy, because again, you may want to save some of the survivors for the actual trial if this does go to trial, and maybe just pick 1 or 2 that make the point right, and then you can fill it in with more evidence as the trial proceeds. But you don't necessarily have to show all of your evidence to the grand jury. You just pick the strongest pieces of evidence so that, again, you're not burning your survivors out before they get to the point of trial unnecessarily. Obviously, they do have to testify and, tell their story so that the jury has something to liberate on. But at the same token, you don't want to push them too much because, again, that trauma is very real, and even if they are getting assistance through counseling or something along those lines, still a lot to have to talk about it, especially in such a huge with this huge media frenzy around it, and so many people weighing in, and whether it be social media or other celebrities or things like that. So those are some of the things think the assistant
will
police
leave you
attorney would have
speechless.
been
When the
considering
first
when
images from
deciding
the
who should
federal
be
raid
brought
on
in
Diddy's
front of the
$40
grand
million
jury to
Los Angeles
testify, and
estate
when
were
it comes
released,
time
no
for
one
trial,
expected
we
this.
could expect
Neatly
to hear
stacked in
from
display
Cassie or
cabinets
other
like prized
accusers in
possessions
federal
were
court. You're
200
bringing up
bottles
a
of
really
baby
good
oil.
point, because
Right
as
next to
you
them,
said, this is
over
probably one
900
of the
bottles of
darkest
lubricant.
times of these
Rows and
survivors'
rows.
lives,
It
and
looked
they
less like a
have to
home
come
and more
forward
like a
with these
warehouse for
serious
something far more
allegations and relive
disturbing.
the trauma
These
that
weren't the kind
I'm
of
sure
items
they've
most
been
people
working
keep
to
in bulk,
overcome.
but
It's
for
really tough,
investigators, it
but we're
painted a
assuming
chilling
that a lot
picture.
of them are
Why
going to
would one of the most
testify at the
powerful men
trial,
in
whenever
hip-hop
that
need
may
this
be,
much?
and
And
there are
more
several
importantly,
accusers
what
that need
exactly
to
were
go
they
through
used
and
for?
do all of that. What would it look
It
like at the
started with a
trial? Then
knock,
at
then
the
a
trial,
battering
now the
ram.
key is
On a
the
quiet
U.S.
morning in March
Attorney's Office has to
2024,
make sure that
Homeland
they're not
Security
going too
agents
far
stormed Sean
afield
Diddy
with bad
Combs' LA
character
mansion
evidence.
in
We
the
saw
elite
how that
neighborhood of
kind
Palm
of
Beach Hills.
backfired
Not
in the
long
Harvey
after, another
Weinstein
team hit his
case, where
Miami
as well as
property
El
on the glitzy
Cosby
Star
case, where
Island.
other
These
instances
weren't
were
just
brought in
casual
that
searches,
were
these
maybe
were
not as
federal raids
close
with
in time, or
helicopters
more so
overhead,
not really
agents in full
enlightening
tactical
the
gear,
jury
and
about what
entire
happened
blocks
and
on
the charges
lockdown.
that were
What
in
were
the
they looking
indictment,
for?
but
That
more so
question didn't
he's
stay
just a really
unanswered for
bad,
long.
horrible,
Inside the
predatory
sprawling
person that may be the
17,000
truth.
square foot
However,
mansion,
when it comes to
agents uncovered a
proving the
scene that left
charges
even
at hand,
seasoned
you
investigators.
have
Holmes
to be
allegedly
very
planned
focused on
and
making sure
controlled
the
the sex
jury understands
performances,
what
which
happened
he
during the
called
time frames that
freak-offs,
are specified in the
and he
indictment.
often
And so if some
electronically
of these
recorded
other
them.
survivors,
A
let's say
few
something
bottles. We're
happened 10
talking
years ago,
hundreds.
that might
It
be
looked
too
less like
far in time for them to be able to testify. But if we're talking about an instance of something that happened last year, for instance, that might be closer in time to allow them to be able to testify. And And again, if they have specific knowledge about certain aspects of the indictment, of course, they'll be brought to testify. Then you have to be very cautious because you want to be able to preserve, if you're able to get a conviction, you want to be able to preserve it on appeal by not making these types of errors. After his indictment this week, Diddy pleaded not guilty to all charges and was denied bond twice. A statement from his legal team reads, quote, Shad Diddy Combs is a music icon, self-made entrepreneur, loving family man, and proven philanthropist who has spent the last 30 years building an empire, adoring his children and working to uplift the Black community. He is an imperfect person but is not criminal. To his credit, Mr. Combs has been nothing but cooperative with this investigation, and he voluntarily relocated to New York last week in anticipation of these charges. Please reserve your judgment until you have all the facts. These are the acts of an innocent man with nothing to hide, and he looks forward to clearing his name in court. More updates are sure to come in the case of United States versus Shad Diddy, so make sure to subscribe to our YouTube page so you don't miss a thing. Reporting for Law Crime, I'm Sierra.